Okay, so covering motivation today. So we'll cover the basics of motivation and then apply this to understanding the drive for hunger, one of the most powerful motivators. Okay, so let's first define motivation. So motivation is defined as factors within or outside an organism that cause a certain behavior. There are various theories of motivation. So first we can talk about a drive theory. Drive theory states that we're motivated by some kind of internal condition, so something that is going on inside you that activates a certain behavior, and that we are motivated then by reducing some kind of a need or to restore the body to homeostasis or a state of balance. So hunger then would definitely fall under a drive theory. Hunger is an internal state, right? It causes you to perform some kind of behavior, causes you to seek out food, nourishment, and by doing that then you reduce that drive, right? You restore your body state back to balance. Incentive theory states that motivation is related to some kind of external goals. So these are things that are outside of the individual, things that pull you or push you to perform some kind of behavior. So incentive theory looks at external or extrinsic motivators. So something like money, for example, could be an external goal that you want to achieve, and acquiring a large amount of money pulls you to engage in certain behaviors. So, if your goal is to make a lot of money, then perhaps you will select a college major that you think will be instrumental in getting you to that particular goal. So maybe you say, oh, I'm going to be an engineer because I know that engineers make a lot of money. Characteristics of motivation. So 3 characteristics here. So first we have the activation phase. With the activation, you are initiating some kind of behavior. With the persistence, then, you are continuing to work towards achieving whatever your goal is. And then intensity, the vigor of motivated behavior. So this is basically how much effort you kind of put into and how vigorously you are working towards achieving that particular goal. So some individuals, for example, have a very strong achievement motivation, and they have a need to excel, perhaps a need to achieve academic success, let's say. And so they are initiating some kind of behavior that will lead them to that academic success. So maybe their goal is to get an A in a particular course. The particular behaviors that they are engaging in would be things like coming to class, studying, persistently. So they are going to continue to attend class even if they face some kinds of obstacles. So maybe they don't want to get up in the morning. Maybe they have a job that kind of competes with their ability to attend class. Maybe they have a family. So despite continued obstacles, you are persistent in trying to get to your overall goal. And then you are showing a great deal of intensity as well, because you are really, really putting forth a lot of effort, a lot of vigorous effort in trying to get to your final goal. So let's apply this then to understanding the drive of hunger, and particularly applying it to understanding factors in weight gain or obesity. So in the United States today, we have a very large problem in terms of obesity. So this is individuals who are overweight or severely overweight. And there are a number of factors that seem to be involved in this obesity epidemic. So first, we have foods at our disposal that are highly palatable. So this means foods that taste good. From an evolutionary perspective, we are evolved to prefer the taste of things like sugar and fat over blander tastes. And unfortunately, the diet within the United States today is largely comprised of these foods that are high in fat and sugar and salt. And so this can lead to overeating, where we basically are just consuming more calories than we need. Additionally, a sedentary lifestyle. So as society has continued to evolve, we do less and less of manual labor, so using our bodies to do labor, and we're more in the service industry, or in the tech sector, or the kinds of professional jobs that you guys will probably hope to get after you graduate, which involve large portions of the day sitting down, sedentary lifestyle, right? Sitting at a desk, sitting in front of a computer. Also, weight cycling, or this yo-yo dieting. So maybe you know someone who engages in repeated dieting. So they'll be on a diet for a little bit, they'll lose some weight, then they'll go off the diet, and then usually what happens is you gain back all of the weight that you lost and then some. So it's this yo-yo, right? This continual cycle that oftentimes results in a higher weight at the end. So many different factors that are involved in weight gain, obesity epidemic. So looking at the research on weight regulation and dieting, we see that our bodies are better at defending against weight loss compared to weight gain. So why is this? So if we look at this from an evolutionary standpoint, it used to be the case when people were hunters and gatherers, right, and food was more scarce, that your body basically didn't know when the next meal would be available. Your body thought that, all right, if we have food available right here, right now, we need to pack on as many pounds as possible. So that's why it's easy for you to gain weight. We need to pack on as many pounds as possible because there is a good possibility that in the future, we're going to need this extra fat and extra weight to be able to survive, because food will not always be available. So that's why it's oftentimes so difficult to lose weight. Your body is basically thinks that it's protecting you against starving in the future. So, when people were hunters and gatherers, that might work great. But in the United States today, where food is very much available, this particular adaptation does not really do us any favors. Additionally, there is this new concept in the research literature called skinny fat, and I'll encourage you to watch the video that's associated with this. But there is basically this idea that just because an individual looks thin does not necessarily mean that this person is healthy. So all of you probably know someone, or maybe you are this person, who can eat anything that you want, junk food 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you never gain a pound. Do you know anyone like that? Yeah. So the research then says that although these people might look like they're fit on the outside, their insides might have all kinds of problems going on. And so some individuals then who are a little bit heavier, but who are physically fit, might actually be healthier than individuals who look thin, but they don't really engage in other healthy behaviors. So looking at culture and how culture influences things like weight and body shape and size. In the United States, the dominant focus, at least for women, is on this thinness ideal, that women need to be thin in order to be beautiful. However, this contrasts very much with the reality, with the obesity epidemic that we are experiencing within the United States today, where around 2/3 of Americans are not at the weight that they should be. So there is definitely this contrast going on here, right, between what is promoted as beautiful and acceptable for women and the reality of the obesity epidemic as exists today. So looking then at culture, we see that in other cultures, so for example, in some African cultures, in Nigeria, I believe, where food is a more rare commodity, so where food is more scarce. If you are overweight, this is seen as a very good thing. Okay, this is something that people in the society ascribe to. So for men, if you're overweight, this shows the community that you are healthy and that you are affluent, that you have enough money not only to afford this excess food to eat, but that you also have enough money to have a job that does not require that you are engaging in manual labor. You can pay somebody else to grow food for you. You can pay somebody else to do the grunt work. You have enough money where you can basically, sit down and have a great cushy office job. For women, this being overweight is a symbol of sexual desirability. So you probably know that women need to have a certain percentage of body fat to be able to carry a child to full term. So for women in this particular culture then, if you are overweight, this shows that yes, you are fertile. You will be able to carry a child to term. So this is a very good thing. So within some of these cultures then, before women get married, they have what's called a ritual fattening room, where the woman is basically sequestered, and she is in this room for 6 months up to a year before the wedding, and her only job is to gain weight. And her family will purchase for her the most decadent foods that they can afford. They'll hire a servant to wait on her so she doesn't burn any calories. So by the time she gets to her wedding day, she is as plump as possible so that her husband will really, really want her. Very different though, right, from the dominant attitude in the United States. There's also considerable variation within the United States, particularly related to ethnicity. So in the United States, for example, African American women and Latina women tend to have a more varied concept of what's considered beautiful for women. Their ideal tends to allow for more variation. So oftentimes African American women and Latina women will prefer a fuller figure as beautiful compared to what the dominant white European American culture propagates as ideal for women. For men, though, let's talk about men and body image and the cultural ideal. So previously, if you had muscles as a man, this used to mean that you essentially were poor, that you were someone who had to work hard for a living. You didn't have a high degree of education, and so muscles used to be looked down upon. However, now a muscular body is something that is idealized and set forth as, what men should look like. This is attractive. And so now a muscular body symbolizes affluence. So if you have muscles as a man, it means that, one, you have the money to be able to join a gym, right? And that you also have the time to be able to do that. So it has been a cultural shift for men as well. Let's talk about some problems that can occur with the hunger drive, particularly looking at eating disorders. So there are two principal eating disorders. There is bulimia nervosa and anorexia nervosa. Bulimia is characterized by excessive eating in the form of binges. And a binge is consuming a very, very large quantity of food within a small amount of time. So, for example, an individual might consume upwards of 2,000 calories, which for most people is an entire day's worth of caloric intake. An individual on a bulimic binge might consume 2,000 calories within a 2-hour period. And then that binge is followed by purging. So the purging is getting rid of the food in some way. Lots of different ways that you could do this. Vomiting is very common, using laxatives as well. Excessive exercise. So bulimia then is characterized by this binging and purging cycle. Anorexia then focuses more on self-starvation. So individuals who are anorexic basically are very restrictive in terms of what they actually consume. Oftentimes, you'll see images of individuals who have anorexia, and they basically, you can see the bones protruding. They're starving themselves. However, although these, and it's predominantly women who have these eating disorders, although these women who have anorexia are literally a bag of bones, I mean, they have starved themselves, they still see themselves as fat. They have this distorted body image where it's never enough. No matter how much weight they lose, they still see themselves as overweight. Anorexia is actually the most lethal of all of these psychiatric disorders. About 10 to 15% of individuals who have anorexia will actually die from this disorder. So very, very serious disorder. Okay, so let's talk about the other end of the spectrum where we have excess weight and obesity. So we can measure this using what's called the body mass index, or the BMI. And the BMI then is a numerical scale where we look at your height and weight to come up with a number. With obesity then, we are looking at obesity defined in terms of a BMI that's equal to or greater than 30. And then on the BMI scale, if you're overweight, your BMI will fall somewhere between 25 and 29.9. And again, more than a third of the adult U.S. population is considered overweight. If you've never calculated your BMI, I would definitely encourage you to do that. All you need to know is your height in inches and then your weight in pounds, and you'll be able to put that into a calculator. You can find them anywhere online, and you can very, very quickly come up with this index.